is good for its owner, that we'll all be eating cultivated meat soon too. Professor Guy Poppy used to be the chief scientific advisor to the UK Food Standards Agency.
This offers an opportunity to offer the advantages of meat, but without the carbon and environmental footprint. And some people are concerned about how you keep animals and then how you slaughter them and prepare them to eat.
The moral concerns.
The moral concerns, that's absolutely right.
Let's be honest, dogs aren't the most discerning diners. And if you find the idea of lab-grown meat unappetising, ask yourself this. If it is safe, tastes the same as the real thing and is cheaper, would you eat it then? Justin Rowlatt, BBC News, Bristol.
Let's see, time now is 7:22. Let's go back to one of our main stories this morning now. The news that Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has said it should be harder for legal immigrants to apply for British citizenship.
Let's talk to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, who joins us now. Chris Philp, morning to you. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
OK, so what does Kemi Badenoch propose, then, to make it more difficult?
Well, what Kemi and the Conservatives are saying is that if someone comes to this country to work and then they don't work, they don't make a contribution, then they shouldn't have a path to citizenship or to remaining here permanently. And in fact, if someone comes here saying they're going to work with a work visa and doesn't, then in fact they should have their visa revoked and should be required to leave. Because British citizenship and the right to stay in Britain permanently is a privilege, and we want people who come here to actually be working and making a contribution. So that is the new policy that's being announced today, in combination with what we said before, which is we'll introduce a legally binding hard cap on the number of visas given out at a much, much lower level than is currently the case, in order to get immigration right down and to make sure we focus on much smaller numbers of people with high levels of skills. And if people come here and don't work when they're supposed to, then they should leave.
When Kemi Badenoch was interviewed by our political editor, Chris Mason, she was asked about the cap. Why wouldn't she give the number?
Well, because we want to work through that and get exactly the right number. But I can tell you now, it'll be a lot lower than recent levels of immigration. And it will also be a lot lower than the recent forecasts we've seen from the OBR and the ONS. Very, very dramatically lower, legally binding, by capping the number of visas given out, because we do need to get these numbers right down and make sure people that come here actually make a contribution. When people come here and then just claim benefits or become dependent on social housing, that is not fair to the British taxpayer who have to fund all that. So, look, small numbers of people coming here to work in high-skilled jobs, that's fine. Mass low-skilled immigration, or people coming here and not working, or coming here and claiming benefits or becoming reliant on social housing, that is not OK.
So what else have you got to work out then before you can get that number?
Well, we need to look at exactly the flows in and the flows out, the number of high-skilled people.
Surely you know that already. Surely you know that already.
Well, we need to make sure we get the numbers right and get the right number of high-skilled people needed in particular professions like finance, IT, scientific research. I'm talking about those kind of fields.
Has that, just sorry to interrupt you, has that changed significantly in the 6 months that the Labour government has been in power?
Has what changed?
Well, you said you need to assess what's needed. You had 14 years in power. You need to assess kind of what jobs need migrants, what sectors will benefit. Has that changed significantly since the Conservatives were in power?
Well, I mean, it changes the whole time. But to be clear, the numbers
Has it changed significantly?
the numbers under the last government were far too high, and Kemi and I have been honest about that and said that mistakes were made by the last government. So we're not trying to get away from that at all. Immigration was too high. The last government made mistakes, but the Conservative Party is now under new leadership under Kemi Badenoch.
Indeed.
And there is a new approach which will involve a low, hard cap, and it will involve asking people who come here and claim benefits to leave.
I understand that, but the information that you had when you were in power hasn't changed significantly enough for you not to be able to give me a cap. You said you've got other things to work through, and I'm not hearing what has changed significantly, that you can't work out a cap, that you can't just say, right, this is our number.
Well, we've got to go through all of the detail. I don't want to just like shoot from the hip and chuck a number out there casually. We've heard politicians in the past, haven't we, in the past couple of decades, give numbers that then weren't met. So we're going to do this properly. But what I can tell you, it will be a lot lower than recent forecasts. But look, the announcement today actually isn't about that number, obviously. The announcement today is about saying, if people come here supposedly to work, they've got to make a contribution, and if they end up claiming benefits or relying on social housing, their visa will get revoked, they'll be required to leave, and there will not be a path to citizenship or indefinite leave. I think that is fair to the British taxpayer. It's a tough approach, but it's fair to the British taxpayer, because we can't expect our fellow citizens to get up early in the morning, work hard and pay their taxes to subsidise people who have recently arrived and who then become dependent on benefits or social housing. That's not reasonable. It's got to stop, and this policy will end it.
What if I put to you that the announcement today is not about any of what you just said? It's about the fact that Reform UK, the party, is way ahead of you, the Conservatives, and you are lagging behind Labour and the Conservatives, and you need to say something to get those voters, potential voters, who have gone to Reform UK.
Well, I mean, the polls are pretty much a three-way tie. The most recent one I saw yesterday, I think it was More in Common, I can't remember, actually had the Conservatives narrowly top. The polls, look, this is not about opinion polls. Look, Kemi Badenoch has only been leader, and I've only been Shadow Home Secretary for a matter of 2 or 3 months. We've been developing new ideas. This is the first of those, well, this along with the hard cap, the first ideas, the first new policies we've come up with. It's only taken us 2 or 3 months to do that, which I think is pretty quick. We've also got a bill coming before Parliament next week, the so-called Border Security Bill, or the Border Surrender Bill, I think more accurately, and we intend to amend that bill with some of these new policy ideas. So that bill is also driving the timetable. That bill, by the way, allows, the Labour government's bill allows illegal immigrants who have crossed the English Channel by small boat, for example, to have a path to citizenship in a way that didn't exist before. That is completely wrong. Illegal immigrants should not have a path to citizenship.
Okay, just briefly, you've mentioned that the previous government made mistakes. Tell me 2 mistakes you're not going to make again that you made the last time.
Well, I think the last government allowed legal migration to be far too high, as I've said already, and the solution to that, the new policy under a new leader, is to have a hard cap every year, so we just stop giving visas once a certain number is hit, and as I said, that number will be a lot lower than it has been in the past. Look, I think also it was unfortunate the election happened before the Rwanda scheme started. I think the Rwanda deterrent would have worked. It would have deterred people from crossing the English Channel. But I think the Labour government then made a mistake by cancelling it before it even started, which was due to be at the end of July.
I was asking about your mistake. Your party proposed the Rwanda scheme, and your party decided to hold a general election before it whether it would have done or not got underway. So I'm asking about your mistakes, not the Labour party's.
And I'm saying the second mistake is having the election before the Rwanda scheme started. That was a Conservative mistake, and we've owned up to that. But the Labour government made a mistake by then a terrible mistake by then cancelling the Rwanda scheme before it even started, because we know deterrents work. We saw them work with Australia, and the National Crime Agency have said you need a deterrent to stop the boats. Law enforcement alone, it's important, but alone it's not enough. And that is a mistake the Labour government made. So look, we've been honest about mistakes that were made. We've got a new leader. There is a new approach. There is new policy that will address the British people's very reasonable concerns about high levels of immigration.
Chris Philp, Shadow Home Secretary, thank you very much for your time with us here on BBC Breakfast.
Thank you.
Time now.
Up to that, but the Labour government made a mistake by then a terrible mistake by then cancelling the Rwanda scheme before it even started, because we know deterrents work. We saw them work with Australia, and the National Crime Agency have said you need a deterrent to stop the boats. Law enforcement alone, it's important, but alone it's not enough. And that is a mistake the Labour government made. So look, we've been honest about mistakes that were made. We've got a new leader. There is a new approach. There is new policy that will address the British people's very reasonable concerns
Chris
about high levels of immigration.
Chris Philp, Shadow Home Secretary, thank you very much for your time with us here on BBC Breakfast.
Thank you.